everyone! What comes to your mind when you hear the word feminist? Is it an ideology? Is it about how women fight for their equal rights? Well, in this video, we will introduce you to feminist criticism. Enjoy! Feminist criticism examines the way in which literature and other cultural productions reinforces or undermines the economic, political, social, and psychological oppressions of women. The issue feminism raises was oversimplified, that we are blind to the seriousness of the issue, right? For example, we continue to use inclusive he to refer to members of both sexes. And people think that feminists should just concentrate on something more important than this nonsense about pronouns. However, it is important because the use of the pronoun he to refer member of both sexes reflects a way of looking at life that uses male experience as the standard by which the experience of both sexes is evaluated. And the damaging effect of this attitude can be seen in many areas, especially education and literacy. And in which, as you can see in the statement here, just pause it if you want to read it first, there was a tendency to underrepresent the contribution of women writers because, again, male point of view is the standard of universality. To understand the concept better, we'll take a look at the traditional gender roles. Traditional gender roles cast men as rational, strong, protective, decisive, and cast women as emotional, irrational, weak, nurturing, and submissive. These gender roles have been used very successfully to exclude women from equal access to leadership and decision-making positions in the family, as well in politics, academia, and corporate world. Women also receive lower wage than men for doing the same job. That's why these gender roles convince women that they are weak, emotional, and not fit for careers in some areas such as mathematics and engineering. These gender roles will lead us to patriarchy culture. It actually promotes the belief that women are innately inferior to men, and it is based on biological differences between the sexes that are considered part of outchanging essence as men and women. For example, in here I use the word hysteria, which refers to psychological disorders which only happen to women and characterized by over-emotional and extremely irrational behavior. But feminists don't deny the biological differences. They even embrace the differences. However, they don't agree that such differences as physical size, shape, and body chemistry make men naturally superior to women. For example, men are more intelligent, more logical, and more courageous or better leaders than women. Therefore, feminism distinguishes between the words sex and gender. Sex refers to our biological constitution as female or male, whereas gender refers to our cultural programming as feminine or masculine. In other words, women are not born feminine and men are not born masculine, which also means that these gender categories are only constructed by our society. As I probably have mentioned before, patriarchy has been used to maintain the male monopoly of positions of economic, political, and social power. And we all already know too about women's inferior positions in patriarchal society has been culturally, not biologically produced because it's different about sex and gender, right? And for example, in here I use the term hysteria again. The term hysteria has been defined as a female problem in which men won't be diagnosed as such, and they were given the less damaging name like shortness of temper when actually the symptoms are the same. Which also means that our society is the one who create this term, who create hysteria, and they create the word of shortness of temper for men. Patriarchy also creates the failure that it then uses to justify its assumption about women. For example, in here I put, little girls have been told that they can do math and they don't need math in their life. They just need to marry a wealthy guy or something like that. And if they manage to do well in math, probably, they are considered exception to the rule and usually considered as freak. However, surprisingly, patriarchal gender roles are also destructive for men because Men are not supposed to cry because crying is considered a sign of weakness, because the traditional gender roles dictate that men are supposed to be strong. Second, expressing sympathy or any loving feeling for another man is especially taboo because patriarchy assumes that the only or the most boyish forms of male bonding are free of homosexual overtones. And the patriarchy culture also assumes that homosexual included as feminine behavior. Third, men are also not permitted to fail at anything they try, because failure in any domain implies failure in one's manhood. Especially failure to provide adequate economic supports for their family is considered the most humiliating failure a man can experience. Now, we will talk about the effect of patriarchal gender roles on both women and men in fairy tales. In here, I use Cinderella's story, and as you can see, the role of Cinderella actually is encouraging women to tolerate familial abuse, with patiently to be rescued by a man, and view marriage as the only desirable reward for right conduct. The role of Prince Charming, which requires men to be wealthy and responsible for making their women happily ever after, actually promotes the belief that men must be unflagging super providers without any emotional needs. When, as we know, men also human, right? They have emotional needs. And the last one is stepmothers and stepsister. Actually, they show bad girls. It means like they are violent, aggressive, worldly, and monstrous. This characterization somehow imply that if women does not accept her patriarchal gender roles, like Cinderella, then the only role left for them is monsters, like stepsister and stepmother. That brings us to a discussion about bad girl and good girl. This concept is actually projecting patriarchal male desire because they have the desire to own valuable women so that to be wives and mothers. They have the desire to control women's sexuality so that men's sexuality cannot be threatened in any way. In here, they actually told women to keep their sexual desire, to not show their sexual desire in any way, and the desire to dominate in all financial matters. And here, bad girls actually violate patriarchal sexual norms because they sleep with many men. Where actually a good girl should sleep with just his husband, right? And that's why it's been said that men sleep with bad girls, but they don't marry them. And good girls are rewarded for her behavior of keeping her sexual desire by being placed on a pedestal by patriarchal culture. Her virtues are associated with patriarchal femininity and domesticity, like she must be modest, unassuming, self-sacrificing, and nurturing. What we can conclude from this discussion is that patriarchy objectifies both bad girls and good girls. Whatever their role is, they are just like objects to be used without consideration of their own perspective, feelings, or opinion. And sadly, patriarchal gender roles have not been eliminated by us, by modern women, because we are modern women just entering male-dominated workplace, and they still bounded by the patriarchal gender roles in their home because they need to take care of their children, they need to work, they need to please their husband, and they need to clean their house too. Okay, here is the summary of feminist premises. I won't read it for you because I think it will waste your time, so please just pause this video and read it. Thank you!
Feminists have long puzzled over the problem of getting beyond patriarchal programming and have offered many different solutions. For example, one way to deal with our apparent entrapment within patriarchal ideology is to consider the possibility that no ideology succeeds in fully programming all the people all of the time. Every ideology has points of self-contradiction, of illogic that permit us to understand its operation and decrease its influence. For instance, the first one is Mary Wollstonecraft resists patriarchal ideology in 1792 when she wrote A Vindication of the Rights of Women. And the second one is as Virginia Woolf resists patriarchal ideology in 1929 when she wrote A Room of One's Own. And the last one is Simone de Beauvoir resists patriarchal ideology in 1949 when she wrote The Second Sex, and as feminist theorists continue to resist it today. Given the difficulties involved in resisting patriarchal programming, many feminist theorists and literary critics believe we should be especially cautious about using frameworks that are themselves patriarchal, such as psychoanalysis and Marxism. Such frameworks are considered patriarchal because they embody various elements of patriarchal ideology. For example, because he used male experience as the standard against which he measured female experience. Freud believed that women suffer from what he called penis envy, and that they tend to see their firstborn sons as penis substitutes to make up for their own lack. However, many feminists draw on elements of psychoanalytic and Marxism theory as well as other critical theories because they find them useful in examining issues relevant to women's experience. For example, psychoanalysis can be used to help us understand the psychological effects of patriarchal ideology, as well as how and why women and men internalize it. Marxism can be used to help us understand how economic forces have been manipulated by patriarchal law and custom to keep women economically, politically, and socially oppressed as an underclass. The third one is structuralist principles can be used to study underlying similarities among the experiences and production of women from various cultures, as well as underlying similarities in the ways they are oppressed. The last one is deconstruction can be used to find the ways in which a literary work covertly reinforces the patriarchal ideology it criticizes, which some feminist literary critics were doing in America before the theory of deconstruction reached American shores. Additional strategies for getting beyond patriarchy have been offered by French feminists. Like American feminism, French feminism is diverse. It consists of many different points of view. Also, like American feminism, French feminism believes that in the importance of social and political activism in order to ensure equal opportunity and equal access to justice for women. We are taking a brief look at French feminism as a separate category, however, because French feminists have tended to focus more strongly on the philosophical dimension of women's issues. Generally speaking, the focus of French feminism has taken two different forms: materialist feminism and psychoanalytic feminism. The first form is interest in the social and economic oppression of women, while the second form, as you might expect, concentrates on women's psychological experience.
So, the next slide, we will present about French feminism. French feminism believes in the importance of social and political activism in order to ensure equal opportunity and equal access to justice for women. The focus of French feminism has taken two different forms: materialist feminism and psychoanalytic feminism. The first form is interested in the social and economic oppression of women, while the second form, as you might expect, concentrates on women's psychological experience. Next, so you can see that French feminism divided into two: materialist feminism and psychoanalytic feminism. For materialist feminism, we have Simone, Christine, and Colette. For psychoanalytic feminism, we have Helene, Luce, and Julia. Okay, so the next slide will be presented by Diva.
Although Simone de Beauvoir didn't refer to herself as a materialist feminist, her groundbreaking The Second Sex in 1949 created a theoretical basis for materialist feminists for decades to come. The first one, in a patriarchal society, Beauvoir observed men are considered essential subjects or independent self with free will, while women are considered contingent beings or dependent beings controlled by circumstances. And the second one, men can act upon the word, change it, give it meaning, while women have meaning only in a relation to men. Thus, women are defined not just in terms of their difference from men, but in terms of their inadequacy in comparison to men. The last one, a woman is not a person in her own right. She is man's other. She is less than a man. She is a kind of alien in a man's world. She is not a fully developed human being the way a man is. One of many thinkers influenced by Beauvoir, Christine Delphi offers a feminist critique of patriarchy based on Marxism principles. Delphi, who coined the phrase materialist feminism in the early 1970s, focuses her analysis on the family as economic unit. Just as the lower classes are oppressed by the upper classes in society as a whole, she explains women are the subordinates within families. For Delphi, marriage is a labor contract that ties women to unpaid domestic labor, commonly trivialized as housework, not considered important enough to be seriously analyzed as a topic or a problem in its own right. An understanding of the implications of this situation is central, she notes, to an understanding of women's oppression.
Now we will continue about materialist feminism. This one from Colette. For Colette, as you can see, women are primarily and fundamentally property. For example, property to be exchanged or given away, depending on the culture to which they belong in marriage. The second point, women are, as Colette put it, the social tool assigned to those tasks that men don't want to do. So we can see that from these 2 points, the first one, the marriage contract put no limits on the time wives and any other woman living in the family, such as daughter, aunts, and grandmother, will have to work, and specifies no holiday on which they won't have to work. In some culture, women's hairs and even their milk are sold by male members of the family. The number of children a couple will have is decided by the male, and children are still the legal property of the husband. Women's sexual obligation to men occurs both in marriage and in prostitution. For Colette, the primary difference between the two is that the time limit are placed on a man's use of prostitutes, and he must pay for a specific act he wants. Although the caretaking of babies, children, and the elderly and the sick is sometimes carried out by paid workers, who are usually women, of course, the overwhelming majority of it's done by unpaid female family members, or in some cultures, by unpaid female religious workers, such as nuns. The overall effect of all 4 areas of the appropriation is to deprive women of a sense of their individuality as well as of their independence and autonomy. Okay, next we will continue into the psychoanalytical feminism. Here we have Helene. Helene argues that language reveals what she calls patriarchal binary thought, which might be defined as seeing the world in terms of polar opposite, one which is considered superior to other. Examples include such as hierarchical binary oppositions as head or heart, father or mother, culture or nature, intelligible and palpable, that which can be understood by the mind versus that which can be felt by the body. Sun, moon, and activity or passivity. Opposition like this organize the way we think, and for its opposition, Helene asks, where is the woman? For Helene, a woman will not learn to resist patriarchal thinking by becoming part of the patriarchal power structures. That is, by obtaining equal status and equal opportunity in current patriarchal society. For women, acquisition of power within the existing socio-political system would not adequately change for the system. Indeed, the result would be that women would become more like patriarchal men because they would learn to think as patriarchal men have been trained to think. Instead, she argues that as the source of life, women are themselves the source power of the energy. We, therefore, need a new feminine language that undermines or eliminates the patriarchal binary thinking that oppress and silence women. This kind of language, which Helene's beliefs, best expresses itself in writing, and it's called feminine writing or écriture féminine. It is liquidly organized and freely associative. Next, the idea of psychoanalytic feminism by Luce. In a patriarchal culture, much women's subjugation occurs in the forms of psychological repression enacted through the medium of language. In other words, women live in a world in which virtually all the meaning have been defined by patriarchal language. Caught within patriarchy, Luce posits women have only two choices: to keep quiet for anything a woman say that does not within the logic of patriarchy will be seen as incomprehensible and meaningless. Or the second one, to imitate patriarchy's representation of herself as it wants to see her, that is, to play the inferior role given by her by feminist criticism patriarchy definition of sexual difference, which foreground man is the one who had the superiority. Obviously, this is hard, a real choice for women, or it's not even a choice for women. For Luce, in what many thinkers refer to as the male gaze, the man's look, and the woman is looked at. So, the man is the one who look, and the woman is the object that he look at. To cite the simple example of a patriarchal man who feels he must have beautiful woman on his arm in order to impress other people, is interested in impressing other people. He is interested in impressing other men. In short, patriarchy is a man word. Like Helene, Luce argues that the way to get beyond patriarchy is by means the same vehicle that program us within patriarchy. What is that? Language, of course. And she believes that women-only groups are necessary for the development of non-patriarchal ways of thinking and speaking. Next, we have Julia Kristeva. So, Julia Kristeva doesn't believe in either feminine or women speaks or woman speaks because she believes that any other that essentialize women, that is, that posit essential inborn biological characteristics for women, misrepresent their infinite diversity and leave them vulnerable to the patriarchal essentialization of women as natural, submissive, overly emotional, and so forth. Furthermore, what have been generally accepted by many feminists as the biological differences that women, female, and men, male, as the opposite to the differences social imposed by patriarchy that define us as feminine or masculine, are seen by Kristeva as social differences rather than biological differences because of their concrete effects on women in the real world. As he puts it, the sexual, biological, psychological, and reproductive differences between women and men reflect a difference in social contract. So, sexual, biological, psychological, and reproductive differences reflect a difference in the social contract. In the final analysis, the issues is not how biological difference should be defined, rather the issue is that whatever meaning biological difference might have is instantly consumed, overshadowed, displaced by the social patriarchal, meaning that it accompanies it. Instead of embracing women speak or character feminine as a mean to take us beyond patriarchal oppression, Kristeva maintained that women and men can get beyond patriarchal language and patriarchal thinking by seeking access to what she called the semiotic dimension of language, not to be confused with the field of study called semiotic, which is the analysis of cultural sign system. For Kristeva, again, language consists of two dimensions, the symbolic and semiotic. Symbolic dimension is the domain in which words operate, meaning are attributed by them. What she called the semiotic dimension of language is that part of language that in contrast consists of such elements as intonation, sounds, tone, volume, and for lack of better word, musicality, rhythm, and the body language that occur as we speak, which reveal our feeling and bodily drive. For example, bodily drive that relate to the sexual, to survival, and so forth. Perhaps we can say that the semiotic consists of the way we speak. For instance, the emotions that comes across in our voice, body language as we talk, and it's come naturally. Next, we will talk about multicultural feminism. Multicultural feminism, while all women are subject to patriarchal oppression, its women's specific needs, desire, and problems are greatly shaped by her race, socioeconomic class, sexual orientation, educational experience, religion, and even nationality. One thing that we know here is the patriarchy operates differently in different countries. There are significant differences between patriarchy in the United States, US, and patriarchy in, say, India, Mexico, or Iran. Furthermore, even within the border of a single country, cultural differences affect women's experience of patriarchy. We know that feminism movement have been gone on for several years. But what we know for American feminism, we know that it's usually white, race, middle class, and heterosexual feminists who have always held the most visible position of the leadership in women movement, especially in America. But we are not seeing the other shape of feminism. For example, black women, African women, or the other things around. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, next I will talk about gender studies and feminism. Feminist analysis focus a good deal on the enormous role played by gender. By a society's definition of femininity and masculinity in our daily life. For example, our gender plays a key role in forming our individual identity, both our self-perception and the way we relate to others. Our gender strongly influence how we are treated by others and by society. As a whole, as it is embodied in such institutions as the medical profession, the law, and the educational system, and our culture's hiring and employment practice. Next, I will talk about queer theory. Queer theory is a reaction to a school of 1970s feminism that believes its sex comes with its own essential characteristic. And queer theory has brought a good deal of attention to gender issues by raising questions concerning our society's heterosexual assumption about sexuality and gender. For example, its assumption that males are naturally masculine and that females are naturally feminine. It seems logical that gender has emerged as a field of study in its own right devoted to this and to all topics pertaining to gender. Gender studies or women and gender studies is about gender when their primary focus in the relationship between gender and the patriarchal oppression of women, and purpose to understanding of some of the major issues addressed by gender studies is a useful and perhaps indispensable part of our understanding of the ways in which feminist concerns are continuing to evolve and expand. Other issues that figure prominently in gender study are: the first one is patriarchal assumption about gender and gender roles that continue to oppress women. And the second one is alternatives to the current way we conceptualize gender as either feminine or masculine. And the third is the relationship between sex and gender, between the way our bodies are biologically and constructed and the genders to which we are assigned. And the last is the relationship between sexuality and gender, between our sexual orientation and the way in which we are viewed in terms of gender. Throughout this chapter, many of the ways that assumptions about gender and gender roles continue to oppress women. So let's take a look now at each of these three remaining areas. We need alternative to the current way we think about gender because the current way we think about gender include so many inaccuracies. Although research findings about gender, like research findings in every field, can be complex and contradictory, they can nevertheless alert us to the ways in which we have taken as fact to many widely held, but unsubstantiated opinions and myths about gender. Example is starting with a belief that I think most of us share about the biological operation of testosterone and or the male hormone. We have often said or heard it says about a male exhibiting overly or inappropriately aggressive behavior. That is, aggressive behavior in males is generally considered an instinct rather than a product of such social factors as upbringing, psychological dynamics in the home, exposure to a dangerous environment outside the home, and the like. Once a behavior is considered instinctual and linked to gender, it is difficult for many of us to see it in any other light. Robert M. Sapolsky points out that studies of testosterone levels in males have been limited to showing merely that increased testosterone level accompany increased aggression. There is no research indicating that increased testosterone level cause aggression. It is merely assumed that they do so. Sapolsky research indicates that testosterone does not elevate aggression. Sapolsky also observed that some testosterone is necessary for normal aggressive behavior. From roughly 20% of normal to twice normal, produce roughly the same amount of normal aggressive behaviors in males. So, even if we know the testosterone level for each individual in a given group of males, we will not be able to predict their aggression because the range of what is considered a normal amount of testosterone is so wide. Excessive amounts of testosterone, Sapolsky notes, can exaggerate the aggression that's already there, but it does not cause aggression. Testosterone permits aggression to occur only if that aggression is elicited by the social factors and environment in which aggression occurs. Just as unsubstantiated opinion has been widely accepted as a fact concerning the role of testosterone in male aggression, a role that is also associated for many of us with the male instinct to be the breadwinner and to protect the home, so has unsubstantiated opinion been widely accepted as fact concerning the role of the maternal instinct in females. Again, because caregiving, especially caregiving to infants and young children, has been labeled a female instinct, it is difficult for many of us consider it in any other light. As Linda Brenner notes, research on emotion has revealed that there may be few gender differences in the inner experience of emotion. Gender differences appear in how and when emotion is displayed. She observed rather than in how and when emotion is felt. Especially, she finds that research on gender difference is responsiveness to babies has shown differences in self-reports, but not in psychological measures of response to babies. Girls and women show more responsiveness to babies because they believe they should, and boys and men show less responsive for the same reason. Women are still much more involved in children care than men, and women who take care of children report that they experience both a great deal of pleasure and a great deal of irritation in caring for them. It is interesting to note that men who spend a great deal of time caring for children often report similar response. Most of us have seen the growing trend in fathers' increased involvement in their lives of children. Many women and men are good caregivers to children and enjoy that role a great deal. However, many women and men would not choose that role as their primary function in the household if they had a choice. Gender is socially constructed rather than a matter of biology. Women and men usually behave in ways associated with their assigned gender because they are socially programmed to do so, not because it is natural for them to do so. If there is one dimension of gender studies that is perhaps even more capable of making us rethink our conventional way of viewing gender, it is cross-cultural studies in gender. The American gender system is referred to as a binary system because it consists of two genders, masculine and feminine, that are based on two sexes, male and female, and because those two genders are considered polar opposite. There is no in between. You are either masculine or feminine because you are either male or female. And if you are not one or the other of these two genders, then there must be something wrong with you. In numerous other cultures, there are gender systems that are not binary, like the gender system in force in the United States today, nor what might be called unitary, that is, with our significant gender differentiation, like the two-gender system described. Some cultures see gender as a system of multiple possibility. To exploring alternatives to our current binary conception of gender theorists interested in the relationship between sex and gender, between the way in which our bodies are biologically constructed and the genders to which we are assigned. In short, the whole idea that there are only two genders is based on the idea that there are only two sexes. For despite the progress made in such fields as feminism, gender studies, and queer theory, our society persists in thinking that the word sex and gender mean basically the same thing, and that the only people worth thinking about are the straight people who fit the traditional masculine male or feminine female categories. The term gender identities implies that one's gender may not match one's biological sex. Indeed, may not match either primary biological sex. For if it always did, we would not need the term gender identity. Gender discrimination exists today in a myriad of forms, yet so often the only people aware of it are those who must suffer in themselves or whose loved ones must suffer it. Feminism and gender studies are intimately related. They share some of the same subject matter as well as a desire for justice and a belief in the power of education to change our society for the better. Feminism has worked for gender equality, for a dissolution of the patriarchal gender roles that even today continue to short-circuit efforts to achieve complete equality between women and men. Gender studies is working to broaden our understanding of how complex the concept of gender really is.
Okay, now we are going to talking about feminism and literature. In this segment, we are going to discuss what makes feminism and literature relatable. Before we discuss that, I'd like to inform you what is feminism and literature. As you can see on the slide, feminism is about respecting diverse women's experience, identities, knowledge and strengths, and striving to empower all women to realize their full rights, which is in this theory, they are talking or focus on women's right. For example, that the women's right to show their voice, their act, to achieve their justice. And second is literature. Basically, literature is a written works or books. Most of them are considered as masterpieces. And from this kind of example, if we combine both of them, feminism and literature, we are going to get one point, which is that feminism literature is talking about or maybe we can say that it's a work to increase or enrich our knowledge about women's rights. And now, what makes feminism and literature related? In feminism literature, it consists of literary texts that reinforce patriarchy because the ability to see how patriarchal ideology operates is crucial to our ability to resist it in our own life. This kind of approach was applied to literary works in the male canon, which is it was the dominant mode of feminist literary analysis in America during the 1970s. For patriarchal literature itself is usually unconscious of the sexist ideology it promotes, or we can say that patriarchal literature sees nothing wrong with its own sexism. And why do we need to understand this kind of theory? For feminist criticism, it's also important to be able to recognize when a literary work shows patriarchal ideology in order to criticize it or invite us to criticize it. In conclusion, like what I said before, like what I mentioned before, the goal of feminist criticism is to enrich or increase our knowledge about women's rights, because we do all know that women's and men's are equal. They have the same rights to show their voice and their act. Okay, now we are moving on to some questions feminist critics ask about literature text. As you can see on the slide, there are three examples of the question of feminist critics. And if you would like to see another example, you can go to the PDF and take a look on page 37 until 38. And now we are going to talking about what is the benefit of those questions. those questions. Basically, those questions could help us see the theory of feminists in literary works. In our opinion, those questions are just a starting point, or maybe like the first move you do to get you thinking about literary works in productive feminist ways. Just for your information, that all feminist critics will interpret the same. Oh, I'm sorry. I mean that not all the feminist critics will interpret the same works in the same way, even if they focus on the same feminist concept. By using those questions, it helps us to use feminist theory to increase our reading of literary works, or we can say that it could help us see the way the important ideas that they illustrate, and that might be we didn't understand, or we didn't see it clearly. What is the main idea, or the important ideas that they want to illustrate? Not just that, it also helps us to see the ways in which patriarchal ideology blinds us for our own participation in, or at least a complicity with the sexist agendas. And I think that's all what you can get from using those kind of question. And maybe by using those questions, you can increase your knowledge in feminist ways. Now we are moving on to the last part, which is a feminist reading of The Great Gatsby. On the first example, it's from page 137, chapter 7. As we can see from this statement, Thomas assumes that the moral structure of society rests on the stability of patriarchal family, and the patriarchal family rests on the conformity of women to patriarchal gender roles. As we can see from the novel The Great Gatsby, it also shares Tom's view of patriarchal gender roles. Next is from page 44 and 45, chapter 3. From this, the novel also show a minor female character who are dressed activity in identify them in incarnation of the new women. As we can see, numerous narcissistic attention seekers in various states of drunken hysteria. In other words, those dead women who accompany McClanahan to Gatsby's party invented their own names and biography for themselves to impress their new acquaintances.
We are still going to talk about the feminist reading of The Great Gatsby. And in here, I will be focusing on the characterizations of the female characters. As you can see in the slide, the novel's discomfort with the new women becomes evident in a more complex fashion, and in the characterizations of main characters, Daisy Buchanan, Jordan Baker, and Myrtle Wilson. However, all three women display a good deal of modern independence. Why? Because first, their hair and clothing are very modern. They don't feel that they must behave modestly in public by avoiding hard liquor and cigarettes and immodest dancing. Yeah, just look at the picture. On the left side, you find Daisy. Daisy is smoking. And on the right side, you find Jordan. Jordan is drinking a liquor right now, right? And they all prefer the excitement of nightlife to the more traditional employments of hearth and home. Why? Because again, look at the right pic. Look at Jordan. She is enjoying the party right now, and actually, Jordan has a career of her own. She is a professional golf player, if I'm not mistaken, and Daisy is actually a housewife, but she doesn't really take care of her home. She doesn't really take care of her children. All of them actually just prefer the excitement of nightlife than staying at home, please their husband, and something like that. And now, I will just explain the characterizations of those three women, and you can find the evidence or the real text of The Great Gatsby in our module, page 44. And in here, Daisy Buchanan is characterized as a spoiled brat, in which she just really want attention, a lot of attention from her husband, from Gatsby, and she is a remorseless killer, in which she actually kills Myrtle Wilson. Because Myrtle, I don't know, I'm sorry if my pronunciation is wrong. Myrtle is having an affair with Tom. Yeah. Tom is Daisy's husband. And Jordan Baker is characterized as a liar and a cheater. And Myrtle Wilson is overtly sexual, and she is the only woman in the novel we see having sex. However, looking at the patriarchy theory or something like that, we might say that people might judge Myrtle as the one who is the bad girl. Why? Because she is overtly sexual. She is aggressive, and that's why she is a bad girl. And she sleeps with Tom, and she sleeps with her husband, something like that. However, they don't really see Daisy and Jordan as bad girls, because again, they are not aggressive. And however, we also know that Daisy and Jordan is not a good person too, right? They are evil. Like Daisy is a killer, and Jordan is a cheater, something like that. That's why in here there's a statement about Daisy and Jordan may be bad girls from time to time, but Myrtle's sexual aggressiveness makes her a bad girl all the time, in which they are being objectified because their sexuality, because this women's sexuality, right? Not because of their personality or something like that. However, I might still want to say that these characters are actually display a good deal of modern independent women, because they are just do whatever they want, they wear whatever they want, they don't have to behave modest in public and something like that. And they have like Jordan, she has a career of her own, and like Daisy, she doesn't really take care of her children, and something like that. And I think that's it from our group. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the class. Goodbye.